Welcome to the WordPress Photography Podcast, the podcast for photographers who want to learn how to get the most out of WordPress to grow their photography business. You don't need to be a geek to understand WordPress. Settle back and listen as we show you how. Now, here's your host, Scott Wyden-Kivowitz.
Welcome to episode 81. My name is Scott Wyden-Kivowitz, and today I want to answer another question from you, the listeners of this podcast. As you know, quite often we pay attention to conversations happening around on Facebook and on Twitter and everywhere, and we also ask you what you want to learn about in the podcast. And that's what I'm doing today. So today's episode, I'm answering a question, which was, do I need cookie consent or opt-out pop-up on my page for the first-time visitors? Now, my business is in the US, but sometimes I get EU visitors on my page. GDPR is a law that was passed in the EU, and it is something that is worth addressing. This is something that Imagely has researched quite heavily since this came out, since this was announced, and since it was approved and whatnot. And you might notice that at Imagely, we actually do not have any GDPR consent on the website. That's not to say we don't respect people's privacy, because if somebody does want their account removed, their email address removed from our database or anything like that, we will respect it. We also won't share people's contact information because that's also a privacy issue. However, the laws do not require us at Imagely to do it. So I want to talk a little bit about that. U.S. businesses, United States businesses, are not bound by the EU laws. However, many businesses do still follow GDPR just out of respect for their clients, their customers. Now, that doesn't mean that every business that follows these laws put the pop-up on their site, that notice on their site for consent. But it does mean that they will respect the actions that are placed by their customers, just like what we're doing at Imagely. Now, large companies that have physical operations in the EU do have to follow the GDPR laws. That's companies like Google and whatnot that have these major facilities. Now, you as a small business, if you have a physical operation in the United States and a physical operation in the EU, you probably should be following GDPR consents as well. And what I mean by that is actually putting the consent notice on your website. Now, I just want to point out that when you start reading things about GDPR online, you're going to see a lot of articles that will assume that majority of U.S. businesses have to follow these guidelines. It's not true. If you are outside of the EU, then you do not legally have to put consent notice on your website, even if your customers are in the EU. For example, if you're a destination wedding photographer, but you're based in the United States, you only have a physical location in the United States, but you do a lot of destination weddings in the EU, you do not have to put a GDPR consent on your website, legally. You might want to do that out of courtesy if you do that much business in the EU, but it's completely up to you. That is the GDPR law of how it relates to you, summed up in, 2-3 minutes? Thank you for listening to this episode or watching this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.
You've been listening to the WordPress Photography Podcast. To listen to other episodes and to subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more, please visit imagely.com/podcast.